on the coast. I'm breaking in, shaping up, then checking out on the prison bus. This is it, the apocalypse. Whoa.
And we are back with another edition of Disaster Survival Magazine's Weekly Radio. I am your host, Vincent Von Doom.
Okay, I got physician, explorer, and author Michael J. Manyak with us today. He is the author of Lizard Bites and Street Riots, Travel Emergencies, Your Health, Safety, and Security. Mike, are you there?
Yes, hi, Vince. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. How's it going?
Well, very well. Thank you for having me on as a guest for your show here.
Oh, no problem. It's great to have you. So your book, it's getting really great reviews on Yahoo and Amazon. You sent me a signed copy. Thank you. And I started reading it. It's a really good book. I think everyone should have a copy if they're planning on doing any traveling. And that's what the basis of the book is. It's about traveling and the different emergencies and scenarios that you could run into, right?
Yes, and the idea for this book is really to provide a quick reference for people who are on travel that covers a wide variety of topics that relate both to health and to security, because health and security are intertwined. And, you know, if you're not safe, then your health may be impacted and vice versa. So the two, I feel, and so do my co-authors, feel that these are very much, involved with each other, intertwined. So that's the real gist of the book. And we, in researching before undergoing this endeavor here, we really didn't find any other book that combined the two of these things together in any detail. There were some books that had good medical information and not very much security information, and vice versa. You could find books that have a lot of security stuff in it and information, but not much on the medical side. So we thought, that's certainly been my belief for a long time, that you need to be aware of both types of issues, particularly when you're on travel. So this book is designed for the traveler and also for those that are savvy about travel, because there are a lot of topics and tidbits of advice in here that I think people find useful. And the other thing about the book is it's compact, and it's the hardcover is very sturdy. So this is something you can actually, really take with you on travel. And in fact, Secretary Robert Gates, former Secretary of Defense and CIA director, liked this very much and wrote a nice review of this. And that's basically what he says, is to stow this on your carry-on luggage. So I think we've addressed those issues. I'm pleased with the way it has turned out, because that was our concept, and fortunately the publisher felt the same way, and there we are. So that's the background on the the formation of the book and the reason behind it. I'll just stop here for a second. You're going to edit this out anyway, so.
Well, I'm on your website right now, lizardbites.com, and I was just going to bring up the thing about Robert Gates, because I was looking at the different praises that the book was getting, and that he's a pretty big name. He's former U.S. Secretary of Defense, former Director of Central Intelligence Agency, and President of the Boy Scouts. But he's not the only one that's given this good reviews. You've got a whole bunch of people. You've got Terry Garcia, Chief Science and Exploration Officer of the National Geographic Society, Craig Cook, Medical Director, Sports Diver Magazine, Tim Weir, Fortune 500 Managing Director, and a couple of other big name people. So this is pretty serious. This is the real deal. This book here. As far as travel, we all know that the world is a crazy place, and it can be very dangerous. But a lot of people who are not experienced travelers, or maybe traveling for the first time, or a lot of young people maybe on the fly they decide to get engaged and run down to South America, or college kids, they want to go on a backpacking trip across Europe or go to some weird place they've never been to. Do they really plan the right way, or do they really know what they're getting themselves into?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that people at the last minute may start to think about their health and security, on some kind of a trip. I mean, obviously, if you're going to an area where there's a lot of conflict, then that's security is going to be higher on your list of things that you better pay attention to. But in general, for trips, people don't think a lot about their health and safety. There's kind of a last-minute throw-in situation where they start to consider, well, geez, what happens if something goes wrong? Or do I need to get a shot? And it's like 2 days before you're leaving. So the idea here with this is that to provide information for people who are going to be traveling and what they need to think about to get ready for that. It's a common misconception. Let's say you're taking that adventure trip you want to go on, or you're taking the cruise somewhere. Well, most of these companies, they don't carry medical coverage for you. They actually have very good protections so they don't get sued, but they're really not obligated to cover you very much, and they don't. They will help you in an emergency get to a place where you can get help, but their obligation really ends there, and then you're stuck somewhere, and you really need guidance, insight into what the problem is, and how do you get help and get out of that situation. So these are some of the things that we bring up in this book that people need to pay attention to. The title, people always laugh about the title, which is Lizard Bites and Street Riots. Well, it's kind of a strange combination, but, the reality that covers a medical side and a security side. And that's actually based on a story. I work closely with National Geographic, so they have people going out on expeditions all over the place to remote areas, and some of them, rather dangerous. Certainly, there are remote areas without medical assistance. So I work closely with the medical office there, and they do a really good job on preparation and on management of problems when they occur. But they do call me at times for various things, and I have to laugh. They're pretty funny. They get some crazy stuff. For example, the lizard bites comes from a story that occurred a few years ago when the nurse who runs that office called me and said, "Mike, I've got a problem. Can you help me with this?" I said, "What's up?" And she says, well, we've got a photographer in Indonesia photographing Komodo dragons, and one of the dragons spit in his eye. Well, you don't get those kind of questions very often. And she said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, what did you do?" Because now we're getting it 36 hours later. And it turns out she did exactly what I would have suggested. I gave her a few more suggestions. But, this just points out you can be in some crazy situation. Those are crazier than many of them. But that type of story is what we deal with. And, it becomes part of the wide variety of things that we may have to deal with in expedition medicine.
Isn't this a universal law? What is this called? Where not only might something bad happen, but it usually does. Isn't that a law of the universe or something like that? What is it called?
Well, Murphy's Law, which is
Murphy's Law. Thank you.
Right, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to say that things can go wrong, and if when you're anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's basically part of Murphy's Law, and then there's a corollary to Murphy's Law, I'm told, and that is Murphy was an optimist. So there are things that go wrong. In this case, with lizard bites, this wasn't a bite from a Komodo, but the Komodo has very toxic saliva, and also for a couple of reasons. One, it does have some toxin in it, but it also is loaded with all kinds of bacteria because those lizards feed on carrion, which has all kinds of stuff in it. So, it's an issue if you do get bitten by them, or in this case, they spit in your eye. You better address it. So, and so it just it's one of my favorite stories of some of those kinds of calls I get, and that really was the basis for the title of the book. Hopefully you won't run into that problem, but if you do, we could probably handle it.
Okay, yeah, it's a good name. It's a very interesting name. It does go along with all the different things that could happen, which is a lot of things. You should plan for X, but the problem is most people don't plan for X. I know a lot of young people, they want to go have a good time, and they really don't put a lot of thought and planning into it. If you're a prepper, maybe you do. If you're into survival, you do. But this book seems like it's written for the average person. It's easy to read. It's easily understandable. Let's say you're not.
Well, yeah,
this is your first trip to a country that you've never been to. There's a lot of things like laws. There's a lot of there could be stuff you're allergic to, and the average person might not think about this. But if they have your book with them, your book lists almost everything. It lists everything from hijacking, allergic reactions, bites, all types of stuff. So you got this from your experience from traveling the world, and you're a doctor. How many places have you traveled to around the world?
Well, I've been in at least 70 countries. I haven't added them up lately, but I have. It's approximately that. And the issues, I've been in some very remote areas in some of these countries, like the middle of the Central African jungle, hunting with the pygmies with crossbows and poison arrows. I've been in Antarctica. I've been in the deepest canyon in the world. I was the medical director to the Titanic salvage expedition and went down in the submersibles to the Titanic wreck site. I've been in Mongolia twice for different purposes. Once to participate in the first scientific dive in Mongolia, which was in a large lake on the northern border of Mongolia with Siberia. And then secondly, to go 800 miles deep into the Gobi Desert, where we rode camels for a couple of days to visit this site where the wild camels are being preserved. There's a new species of camel that was identified a few years ago that is very highly endangered, lives in the most godforsaken desert, really austere environment in part of Mongolia, part of the Gobi Desert. It's called the Taklamakan Desert. And so these camels were discovered in that area. And so we went to see them and look at the breeding stations they've been able to put together and try to preserve them. So places like that. And so, I really have been around a lot of different areas. The Amazon, certainly. A wide variety of environments and areas that are not necessarily tourist destinations. I've been to a lot of those too. But the thing is that people, when they travel, they may think that, for example, if they take medication, they may think that the clinic or the small infirmary that's on the cruise ship that they're on will be stocking their medicine and be able to help them if they forgot it or if they need some more than they had planned for example. So that's not true. They will not have that. They won't have access to that.
It happened to me on a trip to the Dominican Republic. I lost my medication, and I got very sick. I had to pay just to see the doctor that was on the resort. We went to the Dominican Republic, Punta Cana, I think it was, and I was on painkillers because I had that back surgery. I had lost my painkillers, and I was on a very high dosage, and I got really sick. I started going through withdrawals, and the doctor gave me the equivalent of like anti-diarrhea medication, and he gave me like electrolytes, like Pedialyte. And I was like, are you serious? This is it? So my vacation was ruined, and then I was scrambling to try to get a flight back home. I couldn't get a flight back home for a week. So I had to basically stay in my hotel room sick the whole time. So I can definitely understand.
Yeah.
But that was my first time traveling out of the country, and I was young. And like most of these young kids, I think that they're not really thinking about all the stuff that can happen. I mean, they think that it's, everything's the same all across the world. The only thing that's different is the food and the language maybe, and maybe some cultural differences. But there's a lot more than that. I mean, first, you're medical. You don't have medical insurance when you leave the country, right? You're Medicaid. If someone has Medicaid, Blue Cross Blue Shield, that's not going to work in another country, right? Don't you need a special type of medical insurance?
Well, that's a very important point to talk about insurance for a minute. So let's do that, because I think that's one of the things that I really preach a lot about is having the proper coverage. Now, if you have standard medical insurance in the U.S., let's say we're going to talk about a U.S. traveler here, but these principles are also global principles, so it doesn't exclude other people. But our knowledge and our base is from the U.S. side of things. So a lot of people do have insurance. Well, you better check with that insurance before you go to make sure that you're covered. If for example, if you're on Medicare, Medicare won't cover you if you're traveling overseas. So, you think you have pretty good coverage. Well, you don't have any coverage for those types of things. Then you're going to have to pay out of pocket, and that's a real problem. You may not be carrying enough money. It's expensive, and you're held as a hostage, basically, because they won't release you or help you out unless you pay up front. So, you have to be careful and understand that you have the coverage that you think is good in the States may not be as good elsewhere. On the other hand, there are insurances that will certainly cover you when you're overseas, but many times what they have is a requirement that you pay first over there, and then they will reimburse you when you get back to the States. So, again, there's a cash issue here that may come up. Now, how do you get around some of these things? Well, first of all, I always travel with and strongly recommend for people who travel either regularly or even for that special vacation to out of the country or remote spot, to have medical evacuation insurance. And it's basically a policy that allows you that if you have a medically necessary need to be evacuated, that they will run. But they do more than that, too. You see, now, you would think that maybe your insurance would cover medical evacuation somewhere, even if you have really top-notch medical insurance in the U.S., but it doesn't. Nobody uses that. There are very, very few exceptions of policies that include medical evacuation, including your high-end gold, platinum, and Amex cards and things like that. You better read what the rules are, because you may be very unpleasantly surprised. So, if you get, let's say for 2 weeks, you're going on a 2-week cruise in the Caribbean, or you're going to Greece or something like that. Well, the 2 weeks costs about $150 to $200, depending on the company, and for that you have medical evacuation coverage. Now, what happens is when you get to have a problem that may require that, you contact the company, and they provide that information for you, so you know how to do that. And you contact them right away. Then what happens is, if it's a good company, they will manage your medical problem. They take over the management of it. That's important because you don't know really what's going on, and you may not be in a position to truly judge. Perhaps you're even impaired because of pain or a mental condition or something, so you're not able to assess these things. But the company will plug into usually a very good medical resource that then handles what happens to you on site. They will interface with the physicians in the hospital or whatever the facility is where you are overseas and help manage the process, and then determine if you need to be evacuated or not. Because the people on site will know most about what's going on with you, but they may have either maybe an ulterior motive to keep you longer, or a need to a desire to do something when your best bet is to get back to the States. For example, you break your leg and you need to have a rod put in your leg. Unless you really cannot travel, I would not do it in wherever that country is. because of several issues. One is the competency of the physicians doing the procedure, possible infections, and possibly inappropriate medical prostheses and things like that. So your best bet is to get back to the States, to get evacuated, get stabilized, and then get out of there. So the medical evacuation coverage will provide that. You need to know, though, and read those policies because there are limitations. For example, a lot of companies will not take care of you if it's an alcohol or drug-related event. In other words, you get drunk and fall off a stool in Torremolinos and smack your head, you may not be covered by some companies. So you need to determine ahead of time the companies that do help cover that. And one of the ones I work with.
How does one find out about these companies? Who do you suggest? How does one start? Who do they call?
Yeah, your situation. If you go online, you'll find a bunch of these companies, and there's a lot of information that you get, and it's not necessarily accurate. There are several companies out there that I would not use. I will tell you that up front, because they'll certainly take your premium, but they're very reluctant to come and get you, even when you need it. And I've had that as a problem in the field with one particular company, which I will not name them, but I'll just tell you, I'll give you the ones that I think are good. And I work closely with Global Rescue, which is based out of Boston. They're very good. I've evacuated people with them. AXO, which is a very large company, and also very good, and ISOS. That's another large international company that's very good. And Europe Assistance, I think, is also good. So here's the trade-off. So you get those large companies like ISOS and AXO and probably Europe Assistance too. And what happens is that there are so many people that are trying to manage and handle that you may not get the how do I word this the right way? I'm trying to say that because you're just one of a lot of people that are going, you may not get quite the personal attention that you think you should get. Although I do say that usually you will really get what you need. It's just that with a larger company, sometimes you run into that. With the smaller companies, they seem to be a little more attentive to quickly get back to you and deal with the problem. The other companies get back to you quickly too. I don't mean to imply that, but
now there's some places they won't even go to, right? Though you got to check with them before you go.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. For example, I don't know that there is a company that will go into a hot firing zone such as Syria or Iraq or something like that. But if you're going there, that's a little different situation anyway. But there are some companies that will consider certain areas of large areas of Africa or Southeast Asia or some places as being too dangerous, so they won't provide coverage in those areas. That's what you have to find out. Where are you covered? If you're planning to go someplace, make sure the policy you get covers the area you're going to, and very importantly here, and that it covers the activity that you're doing. Some things are excluded. For example, helicopter skiing may very well be excluded from a lot of companies because it's dangerous. And so if you're planning to go there and think, well, I'm cool, I'm good, I'm covered with, I've got this medical evacuation policy, well, you better make sure that it's really covered in that policy. Now, I happen to like Global Rescue because they cover, a lot of things, a lot of areas that are considered remote, and they do a very good job. For example, I'm not paid by them. I just am an advisor to them. So I don't want this to sound like a commercial here for them. But for example, they will, if you're 150 miles from home, then you qualify to be evacuated. So this could be in the States too. You're out in Montana, or some other place, 150 miles from home. You then qualify to be medically evacuated, and you get evacuated to the hospital of your choice. If you want to come to Johns Hopkins or Duke or MD Anderson in Texas or something like that, then that's what you're allowed to do. So these guys are very good at that. And those are the kind of things you want to look for. What happens to me if I go down in this area where I am? Who do I speak to? How do we get connected? How does this work? How do you manage the process? And then where am I going to be going if I need to be evacuated? And you sort all that out. And it'd be good to do that ahead of time. When you sign up for the policy, call them up, get on the phone with them for 15 minutes, just walk through the process, make sure you're comfortable that if something does happen, you know what to do. Because, as you and I both know, what happens when you have a problem like that? Well, there's chaos frequently. People are very upset. It's emotional. Somebody's injured, maybe very seriously injured, and people don't always think clearly in those situations. So it's very good to have all of this ahead of time, ready to activate if you really need it. Now, the vast majority of times you're not going to need it, But I'm telling you, on travel, it's interesting. If you look at the statistics, we've got millions and millions of travelers going to the developed world, and anywhere from about a quarter of them to 2/3 of them will self-report some kind of medical issue, either while they're traveling or when they get home. And out of that group, it's a small percentage that needs to be evacuated. So it's 0.01%, let's say. That was one paper. I think the stats have been updated since then. But that was a few years ago. So it's a small percentage, but when you multiply it by 50 million, then you're talking about a real number. So you're talking about 50,000 evacuations a year. And, so it could happen to you, although it's less likely to be a problem. So again, if you have the correct coverage, then you'll be able to activate a plan to get you to where you can get the right help. And they will make that determination. They have worldwide networks and access to transportation and things like that you personally will not as a traveler. Yeah. So those are really key things.
The problem is, I think when people get ready to go traveling or on a vacation, they get very excited, and I think they forget a lot of things. People forget to pack certain things, they forget to plan certain things. When most people go to a travel agency, and there'll be a deal. We'll get you to this destination for this and this, and then people they jump on it right away. And when you're at the travel agency, sometimes the travel agent doesn't maybe do their job 100% correct, or it's not a really good travel agency. That's why you're getting a cheap price. Now, do they automatically tell you, like, this is what you're going to need there? You should get this. Do you want travel insurance? And do they explain to you what the different travel insurances cover? Because I think there's a lot of, especially young people, who they'll just be so excited to go on the trip. And, they're young, so they think they're invincible. So they say, let's just pay for it, pack our bags, and let's go. We've got travel insurance. We paid an extra couple $100. We've got travel insurance, blah, blah, blah. But it's, are they, just because they're getting a good deal from some travel agent, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're fully covered for whatever's going to happen, right?
That's correct, Vince. You really... the travel agency is there to sell you a trip, okay? They usually will not go into safety details or medical insurance coverage. They may very well offer you their own medical insurance package where they have a relationship with somebody, so they get a commission for selling it. But is that the policy you need? Not necessarily, and likely not, to be honest with you. It may not cover all the parts you need. So there are three things to think about when you have this type of coverage for travel. There is the medical component, which covers your costs of medication and hospitalization. There is the trip insurance, the things like cancellation of your flights, lost baggage, things like that. And then there's medical evacuation. And those are separate things, and they can be bundled in a package together, or they may be separate. Now, the trip support, the assistance, the lost luggage and the canceled flights, that's the sizzle. That's not the steak. That costs pennies for them to provide that. and you don't often have to activate that. So that's of no consequence, personally. I don't even carry anything like that. Medical coverage, if you have your own insurance policy, you know that you're covered, that's good, but just double check with them, make sure you're okay. But the medical evacuation, you're going to have to arrange for it. Now, like I said, sometimes you can get a policy that will cover all three of those things, and that's fine. But you may find that they're more expensive because they're covering cancellation and covering, lost luggage and things like that. When it costs them pennies to do that, but the price is more expensive, that's a margin of profit for them on that particular aspect. Key pieces are the medical evacuation and really the medical coverage to coincide with your insurance. So, and you're right. People don't think about that. They think they're invulnerable. We all did when we were younger. I'm sure of that. And you learn over the years that you better take care of some other things. And I've been working with expedition medicine for over 25 years, and it's grown, and we've learned a lot over the course of time there. And these are things that I think are very important when you're traveling.
Yeah, definitely. And plus, I think from TV, I think a lot of people think that, the Coast Guard's going to come save them, wherever they are, or wherever, as long as there's a U.S. embassy in the country that you're going to, they can just call their embassy and everything will be all right. That's not the case at all.
Yes, you are absolutely correct about that. You're right. The Coast Guard isn't going to come and get you, except very extreme circumstances. And your U.S. embassy, where you are, will try to provide assistance to you, but they have no obligation to do much more than that. Now, they're pretty good about trying to help you, but they're not going to come and rescue you, and they're not going to really, if you've broken a law somewhere and you're in jail and you're in trouble, you should contact them because they'll try to intercede for you. But, they really can't do much more than that. They won't provide you a lawyer or anything like that. They will provide you advice. So you can't just pick up the phone and have the cavalry come charging in to save you. So you got to be prepared for these things. And that's the reason this book is useful to people, because what happens if you're coming down the road here and all of a sudden you're walking a trail somewhere and there's a guy laying in the road there and he's got some kind of an injury. Well, how do you manage that? What do you do? This is all covered in the book. What happens if you're in an area where there's all of a sudden there's some civil unrest? You should read about what to do for that. There's just a lot of little tidbits in here, and your preparation is important. I always like to, people ask me, what are the things that you absolutely always take with you on a trip, for example? And I say, well, there are 5 small items I like to talk about, and you can make an arbitrary list here, but the things I like to take are certainly some medicine for diarrhea, some Imodium. We've all run into that. You can get that you can get that in Paris. You can get that, in London. So have some of that in your private stash. A small flashlight that's good, like one of those mag lights. I like those. And there are a variety of those on the market. You never know when you might lose power or you need a flashlight for something in a strange location, and that's important. I also, depending on where you're going, I like to carry what's known as a SteriPen, which is an ultraviolet water purification instrument. It's small and compact, and it helps purify drinking water. And then the other item that I think is good, particularly for females who are traveling, is a doorstop. One of those rubber door stops. If you're in a hotel somewhere, you don't know, especially in a strange city, you don't know, how secure it is. You put that doorstop down there, nobody's going to get into your room before you can call for help. And that includes, if they have their own keys, or the door is defective, or they can break into it easily. Well, they're not going to get in the door very easily with the doorstop there, and it'll give you time to call for help. And then the other thing I always carry, particularly not necessarily if I'm going to Paris, but if I'm going past a bit or more third worldish, I always carry some duct tape. That has so many uses, and you've probably covered this in your disaster survival.
Oh, yeah, 1,001 different uses of duct tape, of course.
That's so true. It's true from a medical standpoint too. It's great if you have a laceration, you can't get to help. You can block up that wound and keep it from bleeding. You can use it for blisters. You can use it to make a sling. There are all kinds of things you can do with it, just in the medical side, but also all the other uses that you've probably listed many times before. So I like duct tape when I travel.
Benadryl.
I've had to use it.
Benadryl, of course. I'm sure there's a lot of things people could be allergic to that they didn't even know they were allergic to because they're not exposed to it here in America or wherever they're from.
Yes, I usually carry something like that. If you have a known allergy, such as the bee stings or peanuts or something like that, you better be carrying an EpiPen, 2 of them actually, because you're going to need to inject the epinephrine. Those people tend to know that already. There's a whole list. There's a list of supplies that I recommend for personal travelers, and then also for larger groups if you're going on an expedition type thing. But Benadryl's in there, yes. But the 5 little things that I like to take, those are kind of the ones I think. If somebody pushed me against the wall and said, "Hey, what would you really say? I've got limited space." Well, okay, these are good things to think about.
So most of this sounds like pre-planning. A lot of preparation goes into it. Do you have a list that people can work off of, a checklist that people should make sure they cross off before they go on a trip? Maybe certain sites or phone numbers like travel advisories, the Department of State, when you call these medical insurance companies, they're always on top of that latest stuff too. Do they inform you of that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's the bulk of what I'm asking.
Yes, in the book, for example, we do have chapters on personal travel medical kit and personal travel supplies, 2 separate chapters where these things are discussed. And those are the types of things that I think you should consider carrying with you so that you're prepared there. Now, as far as the sites for information, the CDC and the Department of State have good websites, the CDC in particular for medical issues, but you have to remember these tend to be conservative and they tend to be also somewhat generic. So if you have a specific problem that you may encounter or a medical condition, you need to work with your doctor too. For example, the CDC is actually pretty good about this. They'll tell you where you will need malaria prophylaxis if you're going to an area that has malaria. So there are some countries you better do that because malaria is prevalent throughout the area, and there are different types of medications that can be used depending on your needs and how long you're going to be in that particular area. So those types of things. It'll give you advice on immunizations, but we have all that in the book too. And you could just need the various chapters that cover that. There's a chapter on lost documents, on theft and lost documents. And that'll tell you the types of things that you need to do if something does happen. You've lost your documents or had them stolen. And that's something we don't think about much. For example, I always carry and recommend that people take a photocopy of their passport page with their critical information and put that in another piece of your luggage or in a different location than where your actual passport is. Because if that does happen to you, then you've got proof that you are a U.S. citizen, and here's the page, and it'll make it a lot easier to replace a passport that's been taken or lost. What a hassle. That happened to me once in Paris in the early 80s, and it cost me 2 days, and it cost me money, and it cost me aggravation for probably 20 years afterwards. I was stopped every time I went through immigration somewhere and saying, well, you have an issue here. Your passport was stolen, and they'd go through the whole thing again, even though that had been all cleared and replaced many years before. So the idea is try to avoid that and make it as easy as possible if you do have such a thing happen to you.
Sure.
And you know, I would just say the travel agency should be able to help you with what documents you need. And there are certain countries that we need a visa to go to, and that takes usually several weeks to get that. So you can't do that at the last minute. So Brazil, India, Saudi Arabia, Australia, although that's easier to get. But you know, there are probably 8 to 10 countries where you still need to get a visa. So you have to apply to the embassy and get that ahead of time. Most all other countries you can get at the airport, but you better check about all that first. So, you know, there's a lot of issues with documents when you travel, just be aware. And if you go to a country that has yellow fever, for example, you better have a yellow fever vaccination before you go there, because you will, in some cases, you will either be detained or even quarantined coming back to another country if you haven't had yellow fever vaccination and you're returning from a country that has yellow fever in it. So those are things that you need to find out about what's required. And those usually, if you go to the CDC website, they'll talk about those usually. So I think that's a good resource to use. I like that one. Again, they're conservative, though, and they will give you generalities. And if you need specific information for that particular country, contact the embassy of that country and talk to your travel medical people. They're going to know, likely know something about that and be able to help guide you.
Okay. Well, that's just the medical part and the disease part of it. But before traveling, you should do as much research as possible. For example, if you're traveling to an area, let's say there's a lot of poverty or a high crime rate, or you're traveling to an area of Europe maybe where there's a lot of kidnappings and suspected sex rings. Like you were talking about the women with the having a door stopper. You know, girls could decide to go backpacking across Europe, and I've seen quite a few scary movies where I'm sure it's not too far away from the truth, where these girls get snatched up and forced into sex slavery. And that stuff you talk about in your book too, how to avoid certain situations. I know a lot of resorts, people just usually stay at the resort, but you can go off into the city or the town, but once you do, you're on your own. And there's a lot of things that could happen to you there, like pickpocketing, kidnapping, you could be held for ransom.
Yes, that's right. And that's what you need to talk about ahead of time if you can. But when you're there in that country, talk to the people at the hotel and ask them, you know, where is it safe to go? Where is it not safe to go? And they're pretty good about knowing where you can go and where you can't go. It's always better to go in a group, of course, and don't flash a lot of money, don't carry a lot of money, don't wear a lot of fancy jewelry. Those are things you should avoid when you're traveling in countries where there's a lot of poverty. I mean, honestly, it would be the same thing. I live in Washington, D.C., and there are parts of D.C. that are pretty rough. I wouldn't do those same activities in my own city in certain areas. So that's the mentality you have to have, that there are parts of the world where you have to be careful where you go and who you're with. And, you know, that's something that may not be as readily available on the internet or with other sources you have, but when you're there, you should check into that.
What about communications? I know a lot of people think today that the whole world is networked together and that your phone will work anywhere, but that's not true either.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You know, it's when you're traveling, it's very important to let people know where you're going and what your kind of travel agenda is, so that if there's something that goes wrong, there'll be somebody that will be alerted that that something's out of whack here, and that there may be some kind of a problem. So that's the first form of communication, is pre-trip. then actually on the trip, you're right. There are areas where it's very difficult for communication. And I'll give you a perfect example from this last week that I was involved with, and that is there were some explorers in the southern part of Colombia doing a trip down the Amazon, and they stopped to look at some rock formations or some art carved up in some caves, and had to come back down, and one of them slipped and reached out to grab onto something, and there was a snake next to where he grabbed, and he got bitten by a very venomous snake, the fer de lance, which is probably the biggest killer in South America. So now they're in the middle of nowhere. This is really a remote area in the Amazon. How do they, number one, communicate with the outside world? Number two, how do they get out of there? So they had satellite phones, which usually, people think, well, they work anywhere. Well, they don't work anywhere, or they don't work everywhere. You're in a triple canopy rainforest. You don't have access to the sky, and it's very difficult sometimes to get signal for a satellite phone in there. This is also true when I had to evacuate somebody from the Andes Mountains at 9,000 feet. Well, we're down in kind of a gorge, and so you've only got a limited amount of space up above where you might be able to triangulate with the satellites that you need to. So we had difficulties with communication there. It was perfectly clear sky. But because of the geographical contours, you really had some difficulties. On the other hand, cell phones may be even better than satellite phones in some areas, because cell phones are now, and towers are now becoming pretty ubiquitous throughout the world. And you may find that your cell phones are a better way to communicate than a satellite phone. But you're pointing out a problem is that you need to determine how you're going to communicate with people and just what the best method is.
So if I'm going to one of these areas where there's no cell phone, what do I got to get or buy a satellite phone? There's someone who can lend me one from whatever hotel or travel agency I go to, or do I have I'll probably have a tour guide with me.
Well, sometimes a tour guide will.
He has a radio.
Yeah, sometimes a tour guide will have communication. Hopefully they will of some sort. And the thing is that the satellite phones they're expensive to buy. You could rent them. It's still not cheap to rent them, but that may be something you really want to have if you're going. Like, for instance, when we went to Mongolia, I had satellite phones, and the reason was there's just no other way I'm going to be able to communicate. But the cellular coverage is actually pretty good in some locations you wouldn't think would be so good. So what you should do is when you get there is find out from the people how can you guys communicate? Can we use cell phones? Do I have to get a cell phone from that country that plugs into their system in some way? So that's something that you really should consider when you have to think of it ahead of time, but you may have to arrange it once you get there. And satellite phones only cover certain areas sometimes, so the cell phone service may be better. Some are better for use on the ocean, and some are better for use on land. But if you talk to the people on site when you're there, they can probably help you with that. Now, they will not be able to probably help you get a satellite phone very easily, because those are expensive and difficult to come by. But they will be able to help you with the communications overall, I think, and tell you what's the best way to communicate. And there may be times you can't communicate.
I was thinking about the travel insurance that you were talking about before, and if you're in a remote location, if you're on like an adventure or whatever, and you get injured, first you got to be able to communicate. You got to be able to make sure you can get in touch with the person you're trying to get in touch with, and they have to be able to get to you. you can't be in such a remote area that even they can't even get to. Like, first they got to take a helicopter, then from the helicopter they got to take a land cruiser to come get you, and then from the land cruiser they got to go take like an ATV to come get you. Like, are they going to be set up to do all that? And what about cultural and language barriers? Does that affect it too?
Yeah, certainly. If you don't speak the language, then you're going to have somebody with you that can translate. And you're absolutely right about the transportation issue because, for example, with this guy that was bitten by the snake, you can't land planes where he was. You can't bring a fixed-wing aircraft in there. You can't bring a helicopter in there. They can't see these guys. You can't find them. You can't communicate with them. So this is a problem. So the issue here was to get this guy in a boat up the river as fast as he could because he had to get him actually to the capital of Colombia, to Bogota, where the antivenom was for the snake and the proper resources to manage any problems that would occur from the bite. So the transportation ended up being a boat for at least part of the way. And then, fortunately, we got the Colombian military involved, and they sent a helicopter. But they couldn't find these guys. They spent 3 hours searching for them, the 3 hours to get there, and then 3 hours searching for them. And finally, they were ready to call it off a couple of times, decided to take another pass, and they finally found them on the river. Now, how do they get them out of there? Well, it happened to also be an area that's well known for narco trafficking, and the military was very nervous that they would get shot at coming in there. And so this had to be a rapid extraction and to get out of that area as quickly as possible. So they did that with the typical, movie shot that you see. They had a cord that goes down, and they propel down, stabilize the guy, and bring him up on the cord back up into the helicopter. And they had to do it quickly and get out of there. So the Colombian military looked at this as an exercise, as a practice exercise. So that was good. So they were willing to do that, but they were nervous about it. And, this is not trivial to get somebody out of there, but they were able to do it and got this guy back. And fortunately, we have a happy ending because he's alive and he doesn't have any problems with his arm. So, the whole scenario worked out well, but it was a real scramble. You couldn't communicate with him, you couldn't find him, couldn't get a helicopter into where he was. It was tough. So, those things can occur.
Yeah, there's just so many things that can go wrong. I mean, the average person, they really don't think about all this stuff. I mean, you're a doctor, you're well traveled. I mean, you wrote the book on it. I mean, you could practically say, I wrote the book on it. And I was just looking at all the different chapters you have. I mean, you really cover everything in this book. It's great. And you know what I really like about this book? You have the QR codes embedded in each chapter, so if they want to, they can scan it and get even more information, right? You're constantly updating the book through the QR code. How does that work?
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. Each chapter has a QR code at the end, and when you cue that in, it'll connect you to a site that has additional information. Now, that needs to be updated periodically, and you're likely going to have the basic information in that chapter, but if there is something of interest, let's say Ebola, for example, last summer, we can have articles that pertain to that as updates in that QR code session, and I think it's a value, and it's something that needs to be updated on a regular basis.
I wish more books had that feature. That's a really cool feature. I wish more people were doing that.
Yeah, well, it takes work to do that too, and I have to admit that we should be more vigilant about adding things to there. But honestly, a lot of things that we would add to that become somewhat superfluous to what the message is in the book. It's just added information, and frankly, it's something that you can find a lot of information on certain things on the internet anyway. But when we find a particular article we think is good, we try to plug it into this system. There's a lot of misinformation out there when situations occur, such as Ebola, for example.
Yeah, and with the internet, yeah, you can research almost anything, but you got to sit there and go all over the place. I like your book because you pretty much have everything all covered in this one book, what you would need for when you're traveling, and I really like it. Who were some of the other authors? I'm not the other people that helped you on your team to write this book.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just tell you, this concept came out of another book. I published a textbook in 2009 on expedition medicine, and that's a big, heavy, 900-page tome, and it really is geared more towards medical personnel that are involved with remote activities, and so it's geared towards somebody who's maybe an EMT all the way up through physicians and that sort. So what I realized at that time was we really need something else for the traveler. They're not going to carry this thing. Half of it is not talking the language that they're going to understand. So we need something that's more for the general traveler, and that's why Lizard Bites was created. So the concept here is to have very succinct information in these chapters, and to cover as many topics as we possibly could that we think you might run into. I'm sure there are a few things we have missed. I keep asking people. I haven't had many, though, I can tell you. A couple things we might tweak and add to the next edition, but by and large, it's pretty broad. There's a pretty broad spectrum here of possibilities. So the other two people, then, since we were going to talk about security and health, I asked two good friends of mine to join me in this. One is Warren Young, who is the Director of Security for the International Monetary Fund. And as I mentioned, he has about 500 travelers every day in various stages of travel throughout the world. And he's a former highly decorated Special Forces officer from Australia and worked with Controlled Risk, among other companies. Controlled Risk is a very well-known security company, and so he's had a lot of experience in that area, and he was delighted to join. And then the other author is Dr. Joyce Johnson, who's a two-star Rear Admiral who's now retired from the U.S. Coast Guard. She was the Surgeon General at that, and she's also headed Project Hope. So she's very knowledgeable. Yeah, she covers areas that I don't. She's board certified in psychiatry and public health and pediatrics. And I'm a surgeon, a urologist, a surgeon, and done a lot of other aspects. So between the two of us, we covered pretty well all the medical topics. And then Warren is the expert on security. So I think we have a good team that put this together, and I'm pleased with their contribution, certainly.
Oh, yeah. These are some pretty serious resumes here, if you ask me.
Yeah, they're experts. They're experts, and that's what I wanted. And they've all been really good about this, and, we're all happy with the outcome.
You know what, Michael? There's a lot of people publishing their own books today on Amazon. They do the self-publishing, and everyone claims to be an expert these days. Everyone's got a book these days now is almost like a business card. It's like everyone's got to have their book, and everyone's got to have their website. But most of the people I've been running into lately, and I've been interviewing, do not have anywhere near the credentials that you have, and the team that you've put together is really, really an all-star team, and you guys really know what you're talking about. Not sound like you know what you're talking about. You guys really know what you're talking about. I've interviewed a lot of other people who, they're experts in survival and stuff like that. There's no such thing as an expert in survival because it's a constantly learning process. But you are a doctor. Everyone on your team is a doctor, and you handle emergency medicine, and you've got a really solid book here, and it's a really great book, and I suggest it to everyone. If they want to get a copy, they can get it at lizardbites.com, right? They can find it on Amazon. Where else can they find the book?
Well, I think those are the two major sources. It's Amazon. Everybody's familiar with that, so that's easy to do. And then and Lizard Bites is probably from the publisher directly. And I don't know the cost comparison, but the book isn't very expensive, surprisingly. And I think that if you have any issues trying to find it, just let us know, and we'll make sure that happens. Occasionally, Amazon's run out of stock before, which actually is a good thing. It's a short-term, shortage there that they have, but you may have to wait a week or so before they ship it to you. But otherwise, I think those are the best places to go. And I thank you for your comments about the team. We all enjoyed putting this together, and we've had a lot of experience with these things. But you're absolutely right. This is dynamic. Things change. Protocols change. There are some things that occur that you would like to see more information on. But I think we've covered a pretty broad spectrum here.
Well, before you go, can we go over real quick for some of the listeners, maybe a real quick step-by-step checklist of what they should do if they're planning on going on vacation, or maybe checking off one of their bucket list destinations to some exotic place. What do they do first? They start out with some research. If they decide where they're going first, and then what? Give us a few steps here of what we should do.
Well, I think there are two major things I think that should be addressed by anybody traveling. One is, what is your personal health? What's the situation? If you're somebody that requires medication or has a problem like diabetes or asthma or something else, a chronic problem, those need to be addressed and taken care of and stabilized. It doesn't mean you can't go. It just means you have to be prepared to go and be prepared to take the correct medications and enough of them, and extra in case you get stuck somewhere. And so you need to work with your doctor a little bit there. I would also recommend working with your dentist a bit too, because if you haven't had a dental exam in the last 6 months, you should probably get one. There's nothing worse than somebody getting an abscess in their tooth, the stuff that causes a root canal to be done, and you're stuck in them somewhere and you don't have access to dental assistance. That poor person might not die from it, but wants to die because it's very painful. So that's easily, I think, remedied by making sure that your dental health is in good shape. So that combines with the medical stuff, and it has to be customized to each person that's going. And then the second thing is to make sure that you are properly covered in case there is an adverse event. So you need a medical evacuation policy. You need to check with your current medical insurance to see that you're covered and what are the exclusions, because then you need to address those or avoid them if you're traveling and planning to do something that might bring you into that realm. And so I think, once you determine those two things, your medical status and your insurance coverage status, I think you're in pretty good shape then. And the last thing to do is, to customize the supplies you need to take with you. Hand carry your medications with you. Don't leave them in your luggage. They may get lost. They may get stolen. There are things that can happen. If you have some critical medications, carry them with you on the plane. And if you're carrying, prescription medications that may be controlled, and particularly in other countries, make sure you have some documentation and that this is for you, and don't bring large amounts of that. Bring the amounts that are sufficient for you alone. That's just something that sometimes people run into. I have not had that happen to me, but I have heard of others. So I think that's the deal. You get as much information as you can about the place you're going, and then you make sure you're medically able to go and that you're properly covered with the right insurance should something go wrong, and then get your supplies together. I think you're good to go.
What are some good sites or good ways to research places that you're interested in going, other than just looking at the coolest places to see along the way? Like, where would you find out statistics or information on, let's say, crime or certain things that are going on? Is there a specific website or thing you could go to that could give you a lot more information on exactly what is going on in the country that you're visiting, more background on the local culture and stuff, or is that just individual research that you have to do?
Well, I think it is individual research you have to do, but I think there are some places you can find this fairly easily. I always like to find out general information about the country. What's a little history? What do they do there? What are the the cities? What are the sites to see? What are the cultural issues there? I just returned from a long business trip throughout the Middle East to 7 countries in 18 days and speaking in those countries. So I had to do a little research.
Wait. How many countries in how many days?
7 countries in 18 days. So it was moving along pretty quickly, a couple of days in each spot. To read about the different countries that I was going to, I had not been to most of these. I had been to some of them, but, the small Gulf states I had never been to, so it was interesting to read about that and learn what the culture is. So you can find that yourself. And then, frankly, Wikipedia is pretty good for that kind of a background. But talking about crime and medical problems, they don't cover that in something like Wikipedia, for example. So you need to go to, I would look at the CDC site, because I think it gives you good general, they break it down by country and they tell you what you really need to be aware of there, and I think that's a pretty good source to use. The Department of State may also have information that supplements that, more related to the crime statistics or the fact that there is crime there. I'm not sure that you'll easily get that information, but there's a third source too, and that is one of those security companies that provide such information. IJET, IJET is a very good security company that provides that kind of stuff if you subscribe to that. Now, I think most travelers don't need to subscribe to that because you're going to use it one time. But if you're a frequent traveler, that's something that may be of interest to you.
Sure. Well, and it depends where you're going, I guess, too. Like, let's say if I'm visiting Italy or Britain, it's going to be a lot different than me and my wife deciding to go into the Middle East for the first time and visit. Like, let's say we want to go visit the pyramids in Egypt, and then we wanted to go to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, maybe visit Qatar, and then follow up with a trip in Dubai. I always wanted to go to Dubai, but there's different customs. My wife has to wear a burqa. You got to follow their traditions. But I heard Saudi Arabia and Qatar, I just read last night that they're starting to go through a lot of turmoil. I know Saudi Arabia is in a war right now with, is it Yemen? And that
yes.
Something about that, even Saudi Arabia, I heard, might even be near collapse, or ISIS is trying to
well, let me clarify some of that stuff for you, because I just returned from there. That's where I was with all those little countries, and then Saudi and Israel. Ended up at Israel at the end. Saudi Arabia is not near collapse. It is safe there for sure. It's a kind of a repressive society, particularly for women. They can't go out by themselves, so they can't go shopping, and they can't do certain things. You need to wear a scarf is a good idea. Certainly, but they don't need to wear the veil and all that stuff. It's not what you're used to in the Western world. You cannot go to Mecca, just to clarify that aspect. If you're not a Muslim, you can't get in there. And I would not advise going anywhere near there, to be honest with you, if you're not a Muslim. Dubai, on the other hand, is 80% expatriates living there. And it's very westernized, and it's almost like a Las Vegas, but more class, I think. But it has that kind of feel to it. Large skyscrapers and a lot of glitz there. But that's perfectly safe. Egypt, on the other hand, you got to be careful in Egypt. And visiting the pyramids is probably safe if you're with the right people. However, I think it's important that you check ahead of time to see that there's no actual turmoil at that time. But Saudi is in a war with Yemen, but they're not anywhere near. They're stable, and they're not. This is not really causing an issue. You would never feel that in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
But those are the things that you have to. You're right. People have a lot of these conceptions about a place, and our newspapers are alarmists. They only tell you the bad things. They don't tell you any good things going on in these countries. And things could be a lot more stable and different than they're portrayed in the international media.
Mm-hmm. So if I did decide to go to a country that wasn't as stable as another country, I should call a travel security company. And what can
I would
they
also
do?
check. I would also check. Yeah, you could do that, but I would also check with the embassy. Check with the Department of State for our side of the story, but also check with the embassy for that country here in the U.S. because they're usually pretty helpful in trying to explain things to you, and they'll let you know if there's something going on. Department of State will let you know if there's something going on. I was almost caught in a coup in Central Africa several years ago, and the State Department provided me good information, but the best information was from the people on site. And so if you have a connection where you're going, that can be very useful too. And, what's the real story over there? Are you guys really having all this trouble? No, it's no big deal. This happens every couple of years. It'll blow over in a few weeks, and the tourists are safe, et cetera, et cetera. You'll find that out, but they won't put that on the Department of State website. They'll issue a travel advisory. And so now you start thinking, oh, my God, I can't go to this place. This is really dangerous when it's really not the case. But they're obligated to. See, that's what I'm saying. They have to be conservative and err on the side of trying to protect people. So what you do is you try to get a composite of information. So the Department of State, the CDC, the embassy from the country that you're going to, and the anything you can find on the website about information about the country. I think those are key sources. If you really have an issue with security, then you could contact one of these security companies and ask them for their opinion. And they want you to subscribe to their service, and you may or may not want to do that, but they'll probably give you the short few sentences about what's the problem there, or if there is a problem. I think I would certainly try that.
I bet you got a ton of great stories, and I bet you got quite a photo collection too of all your travels. And frankly, I'm a little jealous of you because it's one of my wife's dreams to travel. We love traveling, and part of the Survival Network, we go to a lot of expos, and we want to get a what is it called? Those RVs, and we just want to travel the country, go into all the different expos, but we also want to travel the world too. But our kid is still young and stuff like that. But it's definitely, you only live once. You want to see the world, and but it is dangerous, and you definitely should be prepared. And you give a lot of great information, and I really suggest to everyone, if they do a lot of traveling, or if they plan on traveling, that they get your book. Again, it's called Lizard Bites and Street Riots, and they can get it at lizardbites.com. And you also have a personal website, right? michaelmanyak.com.
Yeah. Yes, I do. Okay. I would advise probably going through Amazon or through Lizard Bites to get the book, though, just because of various internet issues sometimes. So the easiest way is to go to the tried and true sites, I think. And I think you and I have talked about this before. And there's one thing comment I want to make about this. The book here is really about minimizing risk. So it's not an alarmist book. It's not telling you, oh, my God, you can't go to this place, you can't travel here, you can't do that, watch out for this. It explains, what happens if you do run into that. But really what this is trying to help minimize your risk, because you're going to travel and you're going to want to travel. And this book is not intended to scare anybody off from travel. It's just to get you ready. And I think that's an important thing to remember. I've traveled a lot of crazy places, and it's certainly spectacular. And back to your comment about wanting to travel, it's a bad disease, isn't it? I mean, once you get it, as the travel bug, it never goes away. It never goes away. So I sympathize with your comments there.
But it is all about minimizing risk. You should definitely have a plan. You should try to stick to it. You should try to stick to pre-planned routes and destinations, and always make sure people know where you're going to be, have a travel itinerary, and make sure you go through all the proper steps, which you explain in your book in detail. And hey, you cover so many different topics. I would love to have you on again on the show to maybe discuss certain aspects of the book in more detail.
Sure, we can do that, certainly.
All right, well, it sounds good. We're running out of time, but I want to thank you for coming on the show. And once again, that's Michael J. Manyak, and it's Lizard Bites and Street Riots, and it's a great book. Is there anything else you want to tell the listeners before we wrap this up?
No, I would just say be prepared and enjoy the trip, because that's really the key here, and this will help you be aware of things that might happen and what to do if they do. And remember, nothing is perfect. You know, there will be things that happen to you when you travel, and it's just to be, how do you deal with them when they arise? So I think this will help you, and I just want to thank you very much, Vince, for the opportunity to be on your show. It was enjoyed very much the conversation here, and it was a good experience to talk about some of the issues that I feel pretty strongly about. So I do thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Michael. And, hey, have a happy New Year. Tomorrow's New Year's Eve.
Yes, indeed. Same to you and to all our listeners.
All right, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Vince. Bye now.
Mike?
Yeah, Vince. Hey.
All right, yeah, we're done. That's a wrap, yeah.
Okay.
That was a good show. That went great, man.
Good.
And when I edit it...
A lot to talk about.
Yeah, we went past the hour, like I said, and we went an hour and almost 40 minutes, and that's without commercials and without the intro. It's going to be like an hour and 45-minute show, probably.
Well, you know, the problem is we're passionate about these things, and you can sit down and talk forever about it, and, you know, I certainly am passionate about it, and I know you are by listening to you, and you certainly are interested in travel, and, you know, so it's easy to sit down and talk about these things.
Mm. Well, you know what's great as opposed to traditional radio? Traditional radio, people had to tune in at a certain time, and if they weren't there to listen to it, they missed it. Now, if they want to search this topic, it's going to come up on the search engine. They'll be able to listen to it wherever, whenever they want. And now everything is getting so networked together that even in people's cars now, instead of just having AM and FM, all the future cars are all going to have internet in them. So if someone's riding around and they want to listen to this show, all they have to do is type in their car, you know, Lizards and Street Riots with Michael and right. Vincent Von Doom, and it will come up right in their car. They can listen to it, whatever. And I'm just really excited because, you know, the magazine's doing very well. A lot of people are getting into preparedness, and they're really understanding the need for it. A lot of the younger people are starting to realize that, you know, life, you know, can be pretty tough, and that, you know, they're really starting to respect their parents and their grandparents and what our forefathers went through, and they're trying to learn all the different techniques that I think were lost for a while, and it's just really great to see so many young people getting into preparedness, and things are really looking up as far as the preparedness industry and the whole survival community. So it's really
good to hear.
It's a great time for all of us. I mean, the attendance at all the survival shows are up. You know, things are really doing good. And then we're going to be launching our video channel soon. We're going to have our own TV channel on Roku. Things are going
good.
Yeah,
we can talk about doing that stuff, too, when the time comes, certainly. I'm happy to work with you on something like that. I'm
Absolutely.
Sure we can do something there.
Yeah, if you have any videos that you want to put up, we can create your own channel for you. Absolutely.
I didn't laugh when you said, I bet you have some photos. Yeah, I got photos.
Oh, I can't even imagine how many cool photos you have.
Oh, it's just been so hard. There's so many of them. It's like, how do you put them together? But I give talks on this stuff. And so I'm kind of,
how old are you, Michael? How old are you?
I'm 64.
64. God bless you.
Yeah. Well, listen, all these experiences, they occur because I'm old enough and been around enough. But I started doing this 25 years ago, and I had some other crazy experiences early on. So, it's all added up and come around, and I'm still fortunately healthy enough to go out and do things too. So that's good. And
you're a wealth of knowledge, man. A wealth.
Well, it's cumulative. You keep learning things, just like you said. You're constantly learning things, and that is absolutely correct. I agree with you. And I'm the same way. So, but what's interesting is now I get called for things, and then all of a sudden somebody else calls. So I can accumulate, like this snake bite thing. I got called out of the blue about this. That was very interesting to be able to try to help the guy, and we were able to do it. So that was very good. And I think that I don't want to say too much more at this point in time, but I think I'm going to be working much more closely with National Geographic in the next year.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think they really want me working with them, and I'm just not at liberty to say much more at this point in time. But that's the kind of stuff I love to do.
Yeah, and, all those shows like on Discovery, they're way up in viewing. All those survival and shows like that. I know National Geographic has a few good shows, but they're getting very high ratings lately. Like I was saying before, the whole prepping and survival industry. But I noticed you had some diving experience, and what I thought of about that was even that survival guy. It was supposed to be some that Australian guy, that big outdoors guy. He's supposed to be an expert. He ended up getting stung by a stingray, right?
Well, Steve Irwin. But he violated a cardinal sin, and that is that he was screwing around with the animal. He was right over the top of the stingray and screwing around with it, and it stung him. And what happened was, it happened to hit him in the chest, in between the ribs, and went right into his heart.
Wow.
And he died like right now.
That's
why he died, Steve Irwin. And he was always screwing around with those animals. You can't do that. Now, if you read about snake bite, that's why I wanted to delve into how this guy got bit by a snake in Colombia, because a lot of times people are screwing around with a snake and they get bitten, and that's what you read about it in the States. That's usually what it is. And some guys get half in the bag and he's trying to screw around with a rattlesnake, and so I tried to find out. This actually was not the circumstance. They were rappelling down kind of a rocky hill, and he lost his balance, and he reached out to steady himself and happened to throw his arm down next to a snake on a ledge. So that's bad luck, and you can't predict that. But at least he wasn't. This wasn't self-induced.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of stories I've heard. I mean, between this one guy who got his arm caught in between like a boulder, he ended up then cutting or gnawing his own arm off. There's tons of survival stories. Yep. I published one survival story in the last issue. It was like a 16-year-old girl, Autumn Veach or something. Her grandparents, they were flying in a Cessna, and it crashed in Washington. Both her grandparents died, and she had to walk out of the mountains.
Yes, I know that story.
3 days.
I know that story. That's pretty wild. That's wild.
She was on the show and in the magazine, and there's a lot to it, man. There's a lot to it, and like I said, the interest is growing. But before we go, do you know Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy from Doom and Gloom? That they have a medical survival handbook?
No, you asked me about them. You asked me about them. I don't know them. And there's a lot of those books out there, like you said, and some of them are okay, and some are, I don't think very good. But I don't know that particular book. But I've heard about those guys.
I'll see if I can get you a copy. I think you'll like them. I'll maybe see if I can introduce you guys one day. You'll probably have a lot to talk about.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Well, we probably have friends in common. Let me ask you one more thing, Vince. Where does your radio show air? Is it on AM, FM, or is it on Sirius?
No, it's just on the internet. Like I was saying before, everything is going towards just podcasts and videos.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
cool.
But that gets put out on my website, and I'll probably embed. My magazine's interactive now, so I have interactive embedded interviews. They can click on, so they'll be able to click on your interview on the magazine, next issue. They can hear it on the website. I put it on Spreaker. Then I put it out across my social media network and Twitter and stuff. And it just keeps growing and growing because anyone who's into survival or prepping, they're all hooked into the Survival Network. And that's what it's about.
No, that's cool. And let me know, and then we'll tweet it out too, so that it gets to the people that are following us and let them
Absolutely.
know.
And I hope you get some extra book sales out of it.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'm very realistic about this. Is not anything that's going to make any money, so I don't really care about that. I didn't write it for that reason. But I do think it's a valuable book for people to have for a variety of reasons. A lot of information in there that people don't know. Even I've had guys that are real seasoned travelers. People say, I'm not going to learn anything from this book. Send me emails and say, man, there was a lot of information there that I didn't know about. So I'm pleased. I think we've done the right thing.
Hey, if you can help people out and make money at the same time, it's a win-win for everyone, right?
Well, it is, but I'm not holding out any hope about making any money on it. But I hope it does get the proper play because I think people need this kind of a resource.
Yeah.
It's useful. So, yeah. So I really appreciate the time you spent with me here. I'm looking forward to seeing the interview, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
I'll be happy to help you. We can work going forward, with things like this. And like I said, I'm sure we can get Warren on there, and I'll bet we can get Joyce on this too, Joyce Johnson.
All right, sounds good. Listen, I'll probably send you the fully edited version by tomorrow night, and then we'll start putting it out Friday, and then I'll keep it on the main page on my website for a week, and we'll put it all throughout social media, and you'll
tomorrow
see,
night's New Year's Eve,
Yeah, but I'm going to email it to you anyway because it's got to go out on Friday. So I'm going to email it to you so you can listen to it, and then it's going to go out on Friday. If you don't get a chance to listen to it,
you mean
whatever. But I'm going to do the best job I can on editing it.
Oh, I'm sure. But you're saying it's going to go out January 1st, Friday, January 1st?
Yes. It's going to go out.
Friday.
It goes out on Friday, so I would like to have it to you before then. I know it's New Year's Eve, but still I'd like to have it to you before it goes out.
Okay.
All right.
I'll verify that with you. Okay, well, I'll certainly try to look at it and listen to it. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Excellent. Happy New Year.
Okay, well, same to you. Thanks very much, Vince.
All right, I'll be in touch. Bye.
Later. Yep, bye. Thank you.